Alright, so we're going to start to look at some other sorts of cubic graphs. Now this one here is what we had a look at last exercise. Um, Cubic graphs can look a couple of different ways. So yes, like that, but also like this as well. So you can see that this one has one turning point, then another turning point as well. It's like you've got one parabola and then another one facing the other way. So cubic graphs can look like both of those. They're only going to look like this, the one that we practiced last lesson, is if you have that same factor to the power of 3. So you see how you have this factor to the power of 3? With this one over here, you've got 3 different factors, which means you're going to have a curve that looks a bit like that. So when we were solving for x, what we're actually doing was finding the x-intercept. So that's going to be one of the things that we need to do in order to set up our graph. So we're going to need to find out where the x-intercepts are. We're going to need to find out where the y-intercept is. And we're also going to need to find out whether the graph points up or down in the end. So you see how this one, it points up. You can also have graphs where the end points down, and we'll have a little bit of a look at them later on. Also, you might see this one here, it looks the same as that. They are very, very similar, but with its rule, we can see that it has this one factor that's squared. So you might remember from quadratics, when you have that factor that's squared, the turning point is on the x-axis, as we can see it is here. So we are going to practice one of those ones as well. But let's move on to our first example. So we've been given a rule, and this is already factorized, so hopefully we can do this reasonably quickly. The first thing we need to do is find the x-intercepts. So that's actually what we were doing, not in D, I think in 6D. So when we were solving for x. So with this one here, if we solve for x, we can see that x is 2, x is negative 2, and x is negative 4. There are x-intercepts. So that's why we're factorizing in the first place. The next thing we want to do is find our y-intercept. Now you find your y, as you know, by making x equals 0. So let's find out what it is. Okay, so minus 2 times minus 2, minus 2 times 2 is minus 4, times 4 is minus 16. So that's our y-intercept. Now we can put them down as coordinates here if we want to. I'm definitely going to show them as coordinates on the graph, so I'm not going to worry about it just here. Sorry. Alright, now this is where I was talking about whether the tail points up or down. So the graph that we saw before, it looked like this. So the tail, and by the tail I mean this last bit here, it points up. The tail is going to point up when the coefficient of x to the power of 3 is a positive number. The tail is going to point down, like that, is if the coefficient of x to the power of 3 is a negative number. Okay, so we want to find out what the coefficient is. Now we had a factorized rule just there. We can't exactly see what the coefficient is going to be when it's expanded in this form. You could kind of imagine it, but what we're going to do right now, just to make sure, is we're going to expand this rule out and see what the coefficient of x is. Now if you expand it out, I'm just going to do it nice and quickly so the video is not too long. You're going to end up going from this, which is what we were given, you'll use your FOIL method a couple of times and your rule should end up looking like this. Okay, now what I was looking at is the coefficient of x to the power of 3. So I'm looking at this section here. That's a positive, isn't it? That's 1. So, whoops. Therefore, tail is going to point up. Sweet, so it's going to have that sort of shape. Alright, the next thing we need to do is sketch the graph. So, let me put the axis down. I want to show all those key points. So before we worked out that the x-intercepts were where are we? These three numbers, 2, -2, -4. So I'm going to put those ones in. There's 2, there's -2, and -4 as well. Okay, now we also had the y-intercept of -16 we worked out, -16. So I'm going to put that in as well. Let's say it's down here. All right, we also knew that because we've got that positive there, our tail is going to point upwards. So I like to start with the tail just so I don't make a mistake there. So my graph should look something like this. It's going to go through there. And we'll finish it like that. Do we see how it has the shape that I showed at the start from that one? Now you might ask, how do we know where this turning point here is? There's one turning point there, there's another turning point. It could be there, it could be there, I don't actually know. I just guess where it would be because you don't actually need to show it at this time being. Okay, so you don't need to work out where your x-intercepts are yet. Not x-intercept, sorry. You don't need to work out where your turning points are yet. You only need your x-intercepts and your y-intercept there. So the other turning point could be there. Okay, you do not need to know where the turning points are just yet. We'll come to that later. Okay, so let's go to the next example. All right, now this rule here, this one here, is similar to what we had at the start. So do we see how this rule, we've got just a factor to the power of 1 and then we've got a factor to the power of 2, so it's repeated. That means we're going to have one of the turning points being on the x-axis. All right, so if I look at this up here, I'm going to be able to tell where those x-intercepts are, but one of them has the turning point on it as well. The one that has the turning point on it also is the one that has the squared. So let's work out where those x-intercepts are. 3 minus x equals 0, that means x is 3. We also have x minus 1 equals 0, that means x is 1. Now where that x is 1, because it's got the squared, that's where the turning point is on the x-axis. So I'll put a little asterisk there just to remind me, because it's really easy to forget. All right, now same as the other example. We want to find the y-intercept, make x equals 0. So that should be 3 times -1 squared is 1. So the y-intercept should be at 3, I think. Yep, 3. All right, now we want to find out what the shape is. Do we want it to go, or is it going to go like that, tail up? Or is it going to go like that, tail down? So we can expand it to find out. You don't necessarily have to expand it every single time. If you can look at this rule and kind of start to do it in your head, if there's only one negative out in front of an x, that means it's going to end up being a negative x to the power of 3, which is what this case is going to be. So this one, the tail is going to be pointing down because we're going to end up having a negative x to the power of 3. So tail points down. All right, last thing we want to do is sketch. All right, x-intercepts from before, 3 and 1. Y-intercept from before, was 3. And we know that the tail is going to point down. So I like to start from the end, as I said before, but we need to remember that this x-intercept is where there's going to be a turning point. Okay, so it's going to start pointing down. Needs to, we don't know where this turning point is, it needs to come back and bounce off this bit. See how it's an x-intercept and a turning point? And it's going to come back up and through that spot there. So that's a little bit wonky, but that's okay. Alright, so we've shown all those key points. We've got y-intercept, we've got both x-intercepts. We don't need to show where this turning point is there. Okay? Alright, now we just sketched a couple that were already factorized. This one here isn't. Now, I'm not going to do this whole thing for you because it's pretty much done in the video that I just did before. So I think, what's this one? So this, I think it was done in E. Okay, so to do this, to sketch this, we're going to have to get it into a factorized form. To factorize, we're going to have to do this sort of thing there. Okay, now I'm going to show you the answer in the end. Once you factorize, your answer or your rule is going to end up looking like this. After you've completed all those steps there. Now from this, we should be able to sketch that graph. Yeah, so I'll do it very, very quickly. Alright, now tail's going to point up. I just need to work out where that is. If I do -1 times 1 is -1 times -2 is 2. There we go, graph's done. But I need you guys to try to factorize this using these steps so you can get it in a position so you can actually sketch it. Alright guys, have a go at those questions. If you're having trouble, please let me know.